Hi guys, it's your boy. No, we won't do that. We will talk to Gene instead, because we have flown airplanes. We are going to go to different destinations, such as the Mun. And that's going to give us an advance, it's going to give us lots of money. We like lots of money. It's also going to give us lots of science, because, yeah, it's the Mun. You want to go there. Not because it's easy, but because it's kind of easy, actually. At least if you upgrade the tracking station, we have flown our planes, so we can easily afford this. We will do that. That is way more important than upgrading the VAB or the launch pad. We will be able to do this with an 18-ton launch pad limit. Now, going to the Mun, was there anything else we could do there? No, I don't think so. I think we will be fine doing that. Okay, so as we did, we unlocked general rocketry, giving us the arguably like the second best engine in the game, the Terrier. So yay. Okay, if you don't count the nuke. I love me some RTG. No, NTR. Words, abbreviations. We're going to fly using the Stay Putnik. Has a lot of limitations. It's the only light pod we have right now. If you compare the weight of a manned capsule and a probe body, you can see that there is an obvious advantage to using this. Remember the rocket equation where we wanted to maximize our mass ratio? Well, that means in some cases increasing your fuel load, but most other cases it's about reducing your dry mass. And this obviously has way less waste of mass. Like we can get this down to 0.8 tons by draining the monoprop, but that's still 16 times as heavy as this one. So obviously we want to use this. Obviously we are also going to need to bring a bit more like electric charge and some other things to consider, things like that. So what options do we have for propulsion? Well, we will unlock the T400 this time. If you check the unlocked cost here, we have 500 funds in unlocked cost for this one. Compare that to this, who costs 275 wet cost. So bringing two of these is 50 funds more expensive than one of this. They have the same stats. So why would you want that one when you can bring this one? Always try to reduce your part count, because it not only improves performance, it also means you save a lot of funds. Hibernate in warp is going to save our asses here, because we could not bring solar panels with us. We don't have those unlocked, so saving the electric charge for when we need it is going to be crucial. What hibernating your pod does is that it prevents it to act as a relay, from what I understand, and it also prevents you from creating maneuver nodes in Time War, for instance. Since we don't have relays and we don't actually have maneuver nodes unlocked, there's no reason not to hibernate this in warp. We have the LV909 Terrier engine, and it's going to give us a lot of impulse. Because if you consider our dry mass here, it's going to be this pod, which weighs basically nothing, 2 antennae, they weigh basically nothing, 2 batteries weigh a little bit, and these 2 science experiments, also very, very light. The only thing weighing us down is going to be the Terrier liquid fuel engine and the tank mass. Addendum to the rocket equation. In Kerbal Space Program, we have a maximum mass ratio we can actually attain. That would be a fuel tank and nothing else, right? And we can't get better than as you see, 2.25 tons to 0.25 tons, which means that for every 8 kilograms of reaction mass we bring along, we need to bring along 1 kilogram of static structure. So that's going to be like the top. You can't reach better than a wet to dry mass ratio of 8 to 1.
Of course, the way to get around this is through staging events. Now, there are many kinds of staging events. There's asparagus staging, there's parallel staging, we can talk a lot about those later, but for now, this is the limitation placed upon you when considering one stage only.
So that really limits you in your strive for more delta V, right? So considering that, we need to save mass otherwise in other places, and we'll get back to that. Why this Terrier engine, while appearing to be very, very good initially, maybe is not the best one, but it's the best one we got right now. Like if you consider the option, like if we bring a swivel engine. Look at this. This is 1.5 tons of mass we would bring along. That's 1 ton more than this little fella here. And if you check our current dry mass right now, it's 0.83 tons. So our mass ratio would be about half as good, which of course would also mean that our delta V would be severely impacted by bringing that along. So now we have a rocket here, which is going to be quite hard to control. Remember, we don't have SAS or anything. So, and we don't have reaction wheels or anything. So the only control is going to be the pitch and yaw authority of the engines. We will not have any roll authority because we only have one engine. And I'll talk more about engines and their roll authority later on, and why they suck with the in most cases, actually, why you shouldn't be using them for that purpose. So we are going to want to be as stable as possible. Remember, this is a brick wall, not quite as bad as the onion pod, but it's not very good. So we will do this in triple symmetry and call that good. Now, we talked earlier about how, well, now most of our mass is going to be down here in this engine, and we're going to have our center of mass move backwards towards that as these fuel tanks drain. First of all, that's slightly offset now, because now we have a 2.25 ton tank up here and a 0.5 ton engine. So it will tend to move upwards just because of that. But what we can also do, if we feel like, hey, maybe our design doesn't allow for that or whatever, especially for space planes or whatever, you can enter. This is with advanced tweakables, which I recommend that everyone play with. You go into the settings in the main menu and you enable advanced tweakables. That will allow you to access the fuel delivery overlay, and then you can see sort of like, okay, what's going on here? The tanks with the higher number is going to be the ones that drain first. So we can actually increase the priority of these lower tanks to something like that, meaning this will drain first, then that second, then that third, and leaving the fuel up top for last. Which means our center of mass will obviously move forwards as less and less mass is present down here. So that's brilliant. That's sort of reminiscent what you see in actual rockets as well, where you have well, you're going to have your fuel and your oxidizer, but those are obviously going to be stored in two separate inner tanks. And what you usually do, especially if you're dealing with like hydrogen and oxygen, where the liquid oxygen is way more dense than the liquid hydrogen, is that you store the liquid oxygen way up here. So you actually use the mass of the propellant to sort of balance your rocket even further. Also, you see in real life that rocket engines tend to weigh way less compared to the rest of the rocket, and propellant is less dense than say in Kerbal Space Program, where it has a density of 5 kilograms per cubic decimeter, which is fairly unrealistic. So I'm just going to launch it as is without performing any calculation here. Now we have just eyeballed that. Okay, we have a thrust of that and we have a mass of that, so obviously we have a thrust to weight of about 1.2 off the pad, and that's enough to get us going. So we have that, we launch it, we fly it, and we get some profit. Again, this will not have SAS. We added the fins, so we are at least somewhat statically stable. So yeah, my shoddy piloting shouldn't ruin this mission, I hope. Of note is that these fins will not help us with stability initially, because we will be traveling too slow for the airflow to actually direct us. However, we have very few forces acting upon us right now. We have made sure to place everything in symmetry, and yet you can see how we start to deviate. So as you see, I have enabled fine controls, because I'm very cautious that I will actually flip out with this rocket. And I think, looking at it, no, we seem to be perfectly stable. So with the last rocket, we went for a gravity turn, which took us to our 45-degree markers at 500 meters per second. I won't be as aggressive this time, because the dry mass of this stage is going to be... okay, no, we're not very statically stable. Okay, now you can see me try to fly this and hear the clicking as I try to panic myself out of this. This will only be an issue early on, hopefully. You can see we're approaching, we're probably passing max Q here. And you can see our lower tanks are now drained, while our top tanks still have fuel in them. And now, well, now we are sort of getting out of the atmosphere, and yeah, we are no longer as stable as we would be, I assume. Yeah, well, we have purposefully built this not super stable with the high fins, so we can have some authority, but that's going to be fine. Anyways, this is going to be a slightly different approach to getting to the Mun. Remember, we don't have any maneuver nodes or such. So what we're going to do is, I wouldn't call it brute force it, but you could call it brute force it if you'd like to. What we do have is patched conics, so we will at least see the encounter. And that's usually good enough. That's usually more important than having maneuver nodes. Remember, the Mun is way closer to Kerbin than the Moon is to Earth. So so getting an encounter is actually pretty easy. You just have to aim sort of in the right direction and hope for the best. It's very touch and go in real solar system, as many of you probably know, I assume, because many of you probably play a real solar system. Now you may be thinking, are you going for an encounter already? And the answer is no. What we will do here is cut thrust. We are out of the atmosphere. We have cleared that obstacle. We will extend these antennas so we won't run out of comms range. And we will time warp, and time warping is going to be very important. Remember, we have no way of replenishing electric charge here. This one does not have an alternator, so every time we turn, or no, we don't have any reaction wheels to consume power when we turn. Every time we transmit data, every time we drop out of time warp, this is going to eat into our electric charge reserves. So we have to be very mindful of what we're doing here to preserve as much electric charge as possible.
So as you can see here, following our very unusual launch profile, we are now not in a low Kerbin orbit, but rather in an eccentric Kerbin orbit. What that means for us is that we won't actually lose sight of the KSE while we are ascending here. And well, we purposefully put ourselves in that orbit because, as you can see, we don't have any relays up in the sky or anything, and we don't want to really depend on getting into line of sight of the other relays that are around Kerbin, because that can be a bit fidgety, especially with this whole gap that is to the east of the KSC, where the next relay is practically like on the other side of the planet. There's a very big gap there in your comms coverage. So you can see that we have performed our apogee kick, so we're now in a stable orbit. While doing our apogee kick, we made sure to sort of adjust our inclination basically by air, because I forgot the target man. What you can usually do is see if your prograde marker is to the north or the south, and then you burn on the other opposite side of the 90-degree marker, and that will tend you to go towards the 0-degree inclination you want for a Mun encounter. Obviously, since you're not necessarily at the node, you won't actually get 0 degrees relative inclination when you're done, unless you're very lucky. So, as you can see here, we still have some relative inclination, but it should be fine. So we'll wait in this orbit until the Mun is in a position where we can easily transfer to it by a burn at our periaps, and that should be about when it's 90 degrees offset to our periaps and apoaps, I guess you could say. We don't have maneuver nodes, so we'll sort of have to eyeball it, but just as it, yeah, you can see how I'm gesturing in the live commentary. What I found was that I recorded this episode like on top of a bunch of other episodes, and you could really tell from my voice that I was getting tired. So it was a lot of mumbling, a lot of stuttering, and more so than I usually do, like more so than I probably saw on average in a 64K Odyssey, which was a very live sort of thing, I guess. Actually, I had scripts for every episode, and that's why it took so long to record. Anyways, yeah, I'm trying to explain that live. I didn't do a very good job of it. I'm not going to do a good job of it here either. I assume most of you know how to get to the Mun. You wait until it's on the horizon, and then you burn prograde. We don't have to perform such a long burn here because we're already in this eccentric orbit. But it's going to be the same principle. Of course, now we have a launch window for the Mun. You wouldn't have that if you were in a low Kerbin orbit, where you would just wait until the appropriate time. Now we sort of have to wait for the Mun to be in the appropriate position. So it's sort of the reverse problem. But the timing of it is going to be the same, and we're going to depart for the Mun and do that, I'm sure, without any issues. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing this as a post commentary.
So we're coming down here. We're coming down below, I believe, 60 kilometers in stock for near Mun science. A pressure reading will give us 15.1, and this will give us 10.1. So obviously we want the pressure reading, because I believe we will only have electric charge enough to broadcast one of these. So we go dut, 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 and complete it, and we only have 6 electric charge remaining. Now, I don't like leaving space debris around. We won't be able to reuse this in any meaningful way. So turning roughly retrograde to Kerbin's orbit here, and of course adjusting this. Noticing that our inclination is very high, we can sort of adjust that on our exit burn using a lot of delta V, which we also have a lot of, so we can just knock ourselves way out. Okay, what am I looking at here? We want to do this. We want to basically do a plane change only now. And get rid of our now useless probe.
So we enter our flight data into our mission return on investment. spreadsheet, and you can see how these compare. And this was actually a very successful mission, both in terms of what we actually got done and also on our returns on investment here. So this is counting our net funds. I deducted the price of the rocket because obviously we lost all of that. But as for science gain, well, we earned more than double from last mission, and our net funds are actually lower, but we played this for less, remember. So our funds per minute here is looking even better than the last mission. So we played this very efficiently. Now I suspect if we start doing return missions, that's going to eat into our minutes played, and if we do eat into that, then these numbers will be lower. But yeah, we'll on the opposite side of things, we'll earn more science as we start returning our samples. So this may drop off and our science gains may increase. So we'll see which balance the belay these numbers will be playing in the future.